What's up, everybody? Yeah, there's a lot going on. Last night was the night of crazy streams. There's like an 8 hour stream whining about the ADL, and 8 fucking hours those people went on. But anyway, hadn't made a video in a while. I found this to be an interesting topic. I used to follow this guy named Endernaxx. I always fuck up his name because it doesn't roll off the tongue naturally. I don't know how he got this name, but he used to be kind of a middle of the road sort of conservative streamer, patriotic, not America first, but like how people generically put up the American flag. He used to put on a good show. Like I don't know why I followed him. I just had come across him, followed him, and come to find out he surprisingly jumped onto Cozy and Nick's team. And just what I found interesting about this is, he's relatively a normie compared to all the other freaks they have over on Cozy. So just to see him adopt kind of their ideology and talking points, um, you can get a better read into how somebody like him rationalizes that ideology, rather than it being about just some character who's jumping over there for attention or clout, which he's probably doing a little bit of that as well. So I don't know, I just thought it would be an interesting topic to delve into. I tried arguing against him too, and he just straight up blocked me. So, which I mean, that's not censorship, but it is kind of funny. These people that want to engage and argue are so quick to block and not engage with people that aren't going to give them clout or whatever. You know what I mean? These are just kind of some pics of him back in when he used to just be like a normie streamer. Like, I have respect for independent streamers because my shitty little channel, that's what I do. I'm just on here saying what I think, whatever. Don't really care how many people listen, how many haters. I don't know if I have more fans or haters. Like, it doesn't really matter to me. It's just getting my viewpoint out there. And I guess this guy wants to have a career in politics, or maybe a semi-career, or have it be more of a hobby. And he's more invested than I am, right? He's going on camera and everything. But to kind of see somebody go from a self-admitted Yang, like he actually worked on the Yang campaign, and he's a former leftist or progressive, and to join up with America First and the Gripers, like, it doesn't seem a very natural progression unless you kind of wanted a shortcut to clout engagement. If you just push their message forward, no matter what you've said in the past or what you've done in the past, there's a place for you, right? I mean, it's sort of, I don't know if I would classify America First as a full-on cult. I mean, I kind of would, but at least has cult-like attributes or characteristics. But that's kind of definitely one of them, where if you push their message, they have a place for you, right? You're helping the guy at the top, Nick. I mean, I don't consider America First to be a political movement. I think to be a political movement, you actually have to have political clout and be in politics, right? Like, what if I was like, oh, I run a political party, or I'm part of a political movement? Wouldn't you be curious, like, oh, well, where do you have people, or do you have politicians that are a part of your party, or what are your connections, or what's your influence? Oh no, we're completely shunned by everybody. Nobody will talk to us. Be like, well, that's not much of a political movement. I mean, I guess technically, but yeah, this was his persona before he made the jump, right? It's like, I didn't even know he went up against Vouch. Like, I don't know. That's respectable. It's kind of interesting. That's just like who this guy was, right? He was on Twitch. I watched him on YouTube. Endernaxx. Socially conservative, economically left. I mean, whatever. That's fine. That's who he was. But anyway, I came across this thread from him. Um, I don't know, it was kind of interesting. Made me feel kind of bad for the guy. I don't know. For those of you who don't know, I used to be a progressive activist, and my career was in left wing politics. The environment is so hostile toward heterodox straight white men that it took very little time for me to begin doubting my conclusions about politics. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I kind of understand them there. You see, I assume that the most important thing was getting universal health care and other such welfare programs. I viewed the Republican Party as the political wing of billionaires. I naively thought that despite being pro life and having a publicly indifferent view of sexual minorities, that I could skate by and obtain some level of influence. It took only a few months of networking to realize that this was not the case. I don't know, I guess they didn't make him feel welcome. My income was tied up in the election cycle, so I chose to continue my career path cynically. I spent the next year or so reconsidering ideas I'd abandoned for being taboo or inconvenient to my ideological framework. Sociological data I learned in college became relevant. I don't know, what is that? Crime statistics, I guess? As I developed this new framework, I began an online personality streaming under Endernaxx. Endernaxx. It helped me flesh out my rhetoric, but I still wasn't entirely honest. I was working within the censorship boundaries of Twitch and found myself not being truthful in order to gain clout. Yeah, so like his theme here is trying to gain clout, trying to gain a following, blah blah blah. He should just be like me and say what he thinks and have, a shitty channel with no followers. That's the true path. I was effectively pursuing a career in media, which would also result in my being dishonest to attain money, something I resented myself. So, due to that guilt, I moved away from streaming despite having made strides toward utilizing it as an income. So, he felt like he wasn't being himself, but he's really finding himself with America first. I don't know. That seems kind of hard to believe for a former leftist, but maybe. Since then, I got married, moved across the country, expecting my firstborn. Uh, I've been considering producing content, getting back. He doesn't talk about Nick, so he used to make fun of Fuentes. And there's actually a clip of him, this really kind of funny, lame clip of him where he talks to Fuentes and he fucking apologizes for A-logging him. Oh, so fucking lame, man. Like, if you felt like sympathetic toward America first, like, don't apologize. Just say like, hey, I gel with your ideas. But no, not everybody, but so many of these people simp for Nick to get onto his platform, to come under his wing because they don't want to do their own thing. I don't know. It's super fucking lame. He's even got this post of when he apologizes to Nick. Super lame. I slandered him. I mean, unless you're making up outright lies, it's just your opinion. That's not slander. You know what I mean? Now you're his simp, bringing him clicks and money and helping his grift just so you can get like a little bit of piece of that action. Fucking lame, man. And just bad judgment. I'm glad to finally be fighting for America first. But anyway, I thought this clip was illustrative of just the stupid narrative that these people tell about why they're marginalized and nobody likes them and people think their ideas are stupid. So basically he's talking about why people like Jordan Peterson, Tim Pool won't have anything to do with Fuentes, even though Fuentes was literally on Tim Pool's fucking show. He just got up and walked out, right? Like, how many people have been on Tim Pool's show? I mean, a couple hundred, but a lot of people haven't. He was literally on his show and he got up and walked the fuck out, right? Like, whose fault is that? He literally fucking bitched out. Like, I know Kanye was there, but who cares? Kanye wasn't fucking forcing him to follow him. Anyway, I thought this was illustrative, so we're going to watch this and commentate.
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Here we go. Here we go.
So I saw on Twitter actually, this was yesterday, that Jordan Peterson had tweeted out that basically that communists were worse than Nazis, and that somehow that this was, which is crazy. Like it's a really high bar to pass to be worse than Nazis, right? So these communists, they're just the worst human garbage trash. Like the same way that in contemporary culture we commonly accept Nazis as being the worst human beings possible within society. And I'm saying this from a liberal paradigm, a liberal perspective, okay? We understand that the American regime would like everyone in the country to think that the Nazis represent the most evil thing you could possibly be. If you could represent the American regime's values, you could say, here's one poll, here's a poll right here, and it's Nazism, it's Nazi Germany. And the entire American regime takes that pole and reverses it. So the exact reverse pole, right? They're on the south, here you go, little south pole, anti-fascist, anti-Nazi regime, and then the Nazis are up here. And they don't want anybody ever even coming close. You know, okay, we're so anti-Nazi that you're not allowed to be a nationalist, you're not allowed to care about people who have the same ethnic heritage as you, and if you do, you're worse than anything else we could ascribe to you. You are.
Well, I mean, I for one think the Nazis are kind of the best example of being ideologically extreme compared to anybody else, even the communists included, who appeared to be a lot more reasonable than the National Socialists. But anyway, basically what he's complaining about is, nationalists, we can't do anything without being maligned and rejected and blah, blah, blah. Well, could you blame people when... Who are the example of these nationalists? Nick Fuentes, who says all the crazy shit that he says. They're self-sabotaging. Anyway, let's listen.
Worse than a racist, you're a Nazi, okay? And that's kind of...
Okay, well, let's go over what some of the... Nick says... Nick, along with Ye, says Hitler is cool, right? He said all this crazy shit supporting the National Socialists. He routinely references Hitler, the Holocaust, blah, blah, blah. So if there was a person that constantly talked about how cool Stalin was, and how base the gulags were, and laughing about, people dying in the gulags, like how badly you wanted to be like Stalin and recreate the Soviet Union, and it really wasn't that bad, would you not call that person a communist? Like, wouldn't that be reasonable? Or a Bolshevik? Maybe not literally, but in spirit, at least in politics. You wouldn't be like, oh my God, I can't believe you're calling that Stalin guy a Bolshevik. Like, that's so crazy. Conspiracy theorist. Because that's basically what happens with Nick, right? Like, he's out there talking about how awesome the Nazis were. And then it's like, oh, I'm just being ironic. Right? Like, anytime someone takes them seriously, oh, it's just irony. It's just a joke. But I wish I had the clip right now, but Nick is literally on audio talking about how irony is a tool he uses, because he always has plausible deniability. Like, oh my God, you actually took that Hitler joke seriously. Loser. This is the post-irony world, right? But the downside is, and he's complaining about this, is people use what he says against him. But how can you tell what's true and what's post-ironic humor? Right? Like, anything you say can be used against you, but then you could just be like, oh, that was irony. That was a joke. Okay, well, people literally can't tell the difference, because it's designed not to be, it's kind of designed to be the same. So there's always plausible deniability.
Basically how the liberal paradigm works. And then you got these classical liberal types who come in here and think that they're making an astute observation because they really don't maybe even understand what's going on. Either they're complicit in the regime's narrative and they're just playing dumb, or they don't understand really the world that they live within. They've never stepped outside. Like, how does a fish know that it's swimming in water? Like, these people, given that they're academics, they're media figures, they tend to have a lot of bias in terms of the fact that because they're so institutionalized, they really have no incentive to ever look outside of the institutions or the systems. It's easy to stay within. It's easier to stay within that system, right? And then perpetuate the myth of the system, and then to say that the problem is actually this other thing, which in the classical liberals' case is this idea of communism, or this idea of like postmodern neo-Marxism or something, okay? Like Jordan Peterson would say, or like somebody like not Jared Taylor, but James Lindsay. Okay. So that's their narrative. That's what they're working within. Okay. So then they come out here and they've got this big brain take. James Lindsay posts something on Twitter that's like Nazi equal communist. And all of these midwits, all these really, really just moronic people on Twitter are like, yeah, that's so true. Yeah, so true. Oh yeah, they're just as bad. Yeah, we need to condemn the radical left in America. We need to ascribe them to being like Nazis, because then, like, if we use our enemy's framework, if we say, okay, we agree, Nazis are evil, and now the communists are just as bad as the Nazis, they'll just give up and we'll win. Like, no, that's not how it actually works. And they think that they can somehow convince a majority of people to think this way, which is not, again, that's not how politics works. So it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how power works in the regime and in the country. They really just don't get it. Or they do get it, and they're just playing a certain role within the system, which is much more nefarious than the kind of being ignorant about it. And this is kind of interesting to me, because I think that this attitude is not only representative in people like James Lindsay and Jordan Peterson, but it's also represented in terms of who independent media platforms, right? And they kind of use, and also it's not consistent, by the way. It's not consistent at all. And this is something that I should probably touch on before I get to Tim Pool. And that's that the communists are platformed consistently.
Who's like an out and out communist anyway, or a tanky? There's very, very few of those people. He's calling just leftist communists, which is an easy slur for people that are progressive, or I don't know.
They're allowed on social media. They're allowed free speech. They're allowed to convert people to believe in communism. They're allowed to make your son a nihilistic atheist degenerate. They're allowed to convert your kid from being a good, wholehearted Christian boy to being a disgusting, degenerate, transgender person. Okay.
Yeah, there's his irrational fear that some Twitter account is going to turn your kid into a tranny. But I guess that's how you try to make somebody like Fuentes or Keith Woods or Joel Davis look good by comparison.
Like, they're allowed to do that. They're allowed to shove so much pornography down your kid's throat that they eventually become a furry or some other degenerate thing, or they think about cutting off their private parts. That is allowed on social media. That is allowed within independent media. And in fact, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, James Lindsay, all of these kind of Con Inc. types, Matt Walsh, will endlessly platform these people. I mean, given that they have mainstream acceptance, right? And this is where the narrative is going. They will platform these people. They will debate these people. Right. Even though they're making the claim that these people are somehow so much worse than the Nazis. They're so much more evil than you could ever imagine the Nazis being, right? So they're working within this classical paradigm of the Nazis are bad, the communists are bad because they killed more people than the Nazis. Okay. That's just like very basic level stuff. Not even like you're not thinking about things for more than 2 seconds kind of level. And that's the paradigm they go with. And then what happens is they consistently and constantly police their right? And this is not a new take to a lot of you guys, but you'll get where I'm going with this. So they'll constantly be like this far right and no further. And we've seen a shift, right? We've seen a shift in the mainstream where people are now becoming a little bit more accepting of more right-wing ideals. You've seen people shift to the right. A lot of these mainstream types like Charlie Kirk, they will basically emulate the same ideas as somebody like Nick Fuentes, right? But
that's another thing. The America First, like Fuentes will say something that's been said by other people, or people say something similar afterwards, and then they come up with this bullshit narrative like, oh, he stole Fuentes' talking points. This is all coming from him. When you're in the cult, that's the way these guys think.
People will never acknowledge anybody who's been canceled essentially by the left, legacy media, the Israeli/Jewish lobby in America. They'll never do that, right? That they find it completely detestable to ever talk to these people. And if they're ever brought up, they're only brought up in the form of ridicule. They're brought up to say, this is the evil person we can never have in liberal society. And if we ever even have a conversation with them, it's the worst thing that could ever possibly happen. But that doesn't...
Well, he's whining because, yeah, Nick is shunned because he says the most ridiculous shit. On purpose, by the way, to get a reaction out of people. And then he's complaining that this is held against them. And he tries to like wave it away like it doesn't matter. But it's his own fault. Like it's your own fault. People find these ideas toxic and that behavior toxic.
Obviously make cohesive narrative sense when you start thinking about the fact that they're unwilling to have a conversation with somebody to their right, who the media has slandered as a Nazi, who has degraded as a Nazi.
Oh, slandered as a Nazi. Okay, this is what I mean. The guy who embraces Hitler, who constantly makes references to the Third Reich, who engages in revisionism to try to whitewash what happened during that period. If somebody did that about the Soviet Union, about Stalin, would it be wrong to call them a communist? We're not talking like an official member of the party. We're talking about somebody who puts forth and agrees with that political ideology.
Who's been taken out of context as this evil horror.
Oh, here we go. Taken out of context. Nick Fuentes, he's a good boy. He's always taken out of context. When he talks about making people die and how did he word it, right? He wants to make them die in the Holy War. You know what I mean?
Thing. They won't do that because their donors tell them not to, but they're allowed to speak to the people who are representing obviously worse values.
What worse values? Okay, so Nick Fuentes says, like, there's no place for anyone who's not a Christian in America, or no place for people who are like, if you go through the history of all the crazy shit Nick said, like, it's some crazy wild shit. It's pretty extreme. He does it on purpose. I think he wants to be as edgy as possible so that he is canceled and shunned, so they can do his whole victimhood, oh, I'm banned everywhere type of dance. And I guess he's trying to make the case that people that are LGBT advocates are somehow worse than Nick.
Worst thing that would happen to your son, if he started watching Nick Fuentes, he might get a little bit more into ironic humor. He might be making some maybe inappropriate jokes that you don't like, but he also would probably become Catholic. He'd become more right-wing and disciplined. He would try to do something with his life.
He might become a right-wing radical. He might storm the January, the Capitol building, like some of his followers did. Let's see, what else? Some of his people... Some America First followers ended up becoming radicalized, engaged in some criminal threats or in prison. So there's also that risk as well.
Inspired to do more with his life. Like, that is what would happen to your son. But if your son went and, let's say, started watching Destiny, well, I could imagine a future in which your son decides to cut off his penis.
That's a very real risk. Destiny watchers cutting their penises off. I thought he was going to say Vouch.
I can imagine a future where he decides to sit inside all day and play video games all the time, because Destiny preaches a message of complete and utter nihilism, that nothing in the world matters, and that you should just enjoy life. You should just have as much fun as possible before you die. It's one big party. Okay? So one is infinitely more dangerous, is allowed mainstream prominence and acceptance, and gets debates with mainstream platforms.
Destiny is infinitely more dangerous than Nick Fuentes. That's a great take.
Okay, you'll accept this guy's ideas as valid, even though demonstrably the outcome of those ideas is much, much worse and much, much more evil. And this is why I want to bring up Tim Pool, actually, because Tim Pool is highly relevant to this conversation. He styles himself as an independent media creator. He's creating this alternative media network that is supposed to be, quote, unbiased and is supposed to reveal the truth of the world as it is. And we still don't get people. It's still being policed. Tim Pool is still policing people to his right. He'll have somebody like Vashon, who will encourage individuals to get on hormone therapy at 10 years old and to cut off their wee-wees and mutilate themselves and basically become good little slaves to the system. He'll platform that person. He'll bring that disgusting person on and give him a voice and give him a time to kind of come off as like this mild-mannered, oh, maybe these communists aren't so bad. They seem kind of rational. You'll allow that, but you're not going to allow somebody who would encourage young men to strive for virtue and valor and dignity and to go back to their roots of tradition, of respecting their ancestors, of becoming Christian again, following in the footsteps of their ancestors who made.
Look, Nick advocates kind of a Christian fascist ideology of making outsiders or minorities not welcome in society, whether they're gay people, Jews, other minorities. That's really what he preaches. So anyone can see how that could go wrong, how toxic that could become. And here he is whining. That's what Nick preaches, right? And here he is whining that he's excluded from fucking live streams. Like, just the difference in whining about being excluded from live streams while he preaches a message of basically putting people back in the closet, making an unwelcome environment for anyone who isn't a white Christian. I find that to be pretty interesting.
This country great. Like, rather than that, no, that's too evil. We can't platform that person. We can't platform anybody associated with those ideas. But we're going to platform somebody like Vosh or somebody like Destiny. It's completely and utterly hypocritical and disgusting for the reasons I outlined earlier in regards to how they think about this communism versus Nazism thing. It doesn't even make any sense. And also, we're not Nazis. Nobody in America First. There is nobody in America First who is a Nazi. None of us are National Socialists. That is a German ideology that existed historically in Weimar Germany. That does not exist today. That's not.
And nobody is saying any American is a full-on Nazi, as in Nazi party. It's saying they exude the political ideology, the obsession. Like, what is a Nazi? I would say it's a Volkish ideology that believes outsiders, Jews, gays, leftists, represent an existential threat and justifies marginalizing them, persecuting them, whatever. Anything is justified because they represent an existential threat. Especially the emphasis on the JQ. I mean, that's my shorthand for how I would define a National Socialist. And he definitely falls into that category, especially with the Hitler love that he loves so much.
I am so sad and disheartened when I see all of these supposed independent thinkers, supposed people. There's really only two options for these people. They're either dishonest hacks, which increasingly it looks like that's probably it, or they've just never really been presented the appropriate arguments and don't understand what's going on. And I tend increasingly, as the years go by, I was always willing to give the benefit of the doubt to these people. But then you read these things from like Matt Walsh talking about Jewish influence in American politics. He secretly knew the whole time. He was secretly based the whole time on this question. And he's a coward. He won't come out and say it. He's an absolute...
Okay, so even if he thinks that about the Jewish influence, what do you think Matt Walsh thinks about hearing that Israel carried out 9/11? You think he finds that reasonable? Or was involved in the JFK assassination? Some of these other crazy conspiracy theories that America First pushes that people would be embarrassed to be associated with.
Howard, he doesn't care about his children. He doesn't care about the future of the country. He cares more about securing that bag from the Daily Wire than he does actually acting consistent. I hope that changes in the future. I hope he becomes more brave. But increasingly, I'm less charitable to these individuals. I thought for a long time, well, they just don't know. If they, if the right person presented the right information in the right way, they could be convinced. They would understand. They would see, okay, this is where we're coming from. These are where these ideas are coming from. Maybe they'd even still disagree, but at least they would understand, okay, we need to bust out of this liberal paradigm, this liberal thought policing that's going on in the culture. We need to bust outside of this idea. We need to say, we're not the left. We're not interested in...
We need to bust out of this liberal worldview, okay, and indulge in these crazy conspiracy theories. You're to the right of somebody like Matt Walsh, but there's other people that are more extreme on the right, especially on the JQ issue and some other issues, and they would say the same thing about you. They would say Nick in America First gatekeeps NJP, the National Justice Party. What's TRS, right? That's what they say. You're calling Matt Walsh and Tim Pool cucks, and they would call you cucks, right? But you would everybody polices people to their right in these circles to some degree or another. Because otherwise it just becomes totally fucking crazy and untenable. On the stream last night, apparently all of these crazy Jew obsessed people like Keith Woods are on there, and they they shunned Adam Green because he's even too crazy for the anti-Semites. So that's kind of the way it works.
Canceling people as the right wing. We're interested, if you really are like truly devoted to this idea that we're going to have all these ideas out there and then the best one's going to win, which is what you think in regards to the communists, why wouldn't you give a place for the people who are on your right flank, for the right-wing vanguard to come in and make their arguments as well? Because their arguments are far less evil than the left's. They're far less dangerous than the left's. And you refuse to give them a platform. And that's just not right. That's not right. And if you are a consistent, supposed free thinker, that's what you should be doing.
I mean, why doesn't like Tim Pool have somebody like Fuentes on? First off, he fucking did. He had Ye and Nick Fuentes. So he had a chance. And yeah, he would get backlash. But this is the thing. If you started Nick Fuentes' career totally over, gave him full access to everything on media, he would find a way to make himself shunned again, like several other people, like Alex Jones or something, by being inflammatory and on purpose. What did Alex Jones do? He claimed that the Sandy Hook was a hoax and those parents were getting harassed. So how do people naturally react with, are they going to say, we love you, let's expand your profile? No, they're going to call for activities like that to be banned. That's just the way shit works. I mean, you can cry about it, but it's understandable. Here he is basically invoking taking up arms to fight against the leftist just degeneracy we see in this country. The left in Spain committed thousands of murders against clergy members in the Catholic Church. Has anything remotely like that happened in America? There were mass disembowelings and crucifixions of priests and nuns. Again, has anything remotely similar to that happened? Reports of the left exhuming dead nuns at convents to abuse them. I'm not sure exactly the historical context of what he's talking about. I have heard about this, but has anything remotely similar to that happened in the United States? No, we have drag queens here. So let's make sure we pick up arms and fight against the drag queens. Here's him whining about being insulted, and he calls the Groypers the most deplatformed dissident movement in America. I don't even know if that's true. Wouldn't the Goyim Defense League say that they're the most deplatformed, or the NJP, or some other group? They're mad because he came up with some hypothetical that the Groypers might kidnap and kill Nancy Pelosi. I don't know under what context he did that, but people are the Groypers are mad and throwing their feces around at each other. This is what I mean, like anything they do is edgy, it's humor, it's irony, it's jokes, bro, it's bants, bro. I mean, what are you crying about? And then when anyone does anything at them, they're the victim, they're being slandered. You should apologize, you should have Nick on. So, I don't know. I find it funny. Their constant whining. Like, here's another post where it almost looks like he brought him on to shill for America First because he was having a career in politics. Most of the American right wing is obsessed with country bumpkins. Few are willing to discuss the issues with somebody like Nick Fuentes, who you deride and degrade publicly, despite your supposed red pilling over the past few years. Yeah, I heard somebody mention that, Nick's been kind of getting around some platforms lately, but he largely did the ones that he can get on. So you see a lot of this begging and pleading to have Nick on, debate him. And this is kind of how they get exposure through these other channels. Why don't you have Nick on to talk about how we restore the greatness to American cities? Like, people can go look at Nick's takes. They don't need to have him on necessarily. And here's a post where he's whitewashing Adolf Hitler. But he's definitely not a Nazi, right? That's just a coincidence that he's defending that guy. Just like it would be ridiculous if somebody was whitewashing Stalin and his crimes to call them a communist or a Bolshevik, right? There's no connection there. Anyway, he's kind of got a bunch of these. He retweets other people who are open National Socialists, like Joel Davis. I called him out on that, and he blocked me, actually. But I was posting some like really cringy thing that Joel Davis is incredibly cringe. He was talking about how, like, if you don't fuck your wife, the Jews win, or something like this. It's just, these people have an obsession, as well as Keith Woods and I don't know, a couple other people, right? He's always retweeting these people or trying to whitewash their background, but he's totally not an enabler for these National Socialist types, right? That's just slander. And here he is defending Joel Davis, pretty much an open National Socialist political type thinker, and Keith Woods, who has said similar such things in the past. That's slander, though, if you say that. Anyway, whatever. I think I kind of analyzed this guy as much as I really want to. Hadn't made a video in a while. And that's about it. Everyone have a good day.